Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it as always. Whether this is the first one you've ever listened to or you've listened to every interview, appreciate you being here. This is a real treat. You know, I'm filming this or recording this a week before the Olympics starts, but this is going to come out right in the heart of this first week of the Olympics. Couldn't think of a better time to release my interview with an Olympian, a U.S. bobsledder. Now, we're going to talk a lot about his experience in the Olympics. He was in the 2018 Winter Olympics that took place in South Korea. We're going to talk about exactly what bobsled is, because I don't think it's a sport that a ton of people know a lot about. So the difference between bobsled and skeleton and luge that all look relatively similar. They're all going down an icy track in some kind of sled, if you will. I don't know whether they're all called sleds. I know in bobsled it is called a sled. So they're all a little bit different, and we're going to talk a lot about the differences. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about bobsled, given that is what he competed in. I think it's going to surprise you how long he had been competing in bobsled before going to the Olympics. It's not what you think, I don't believe. You know, there's certainly some sports that people train their entire lives from the time they can walk until they get to the Olympics for. Bobsled's a little bit different. We're going to cover a lot about that. He was a track and field athlete before he got into bobsled. We're going to talk about the experience of just representing your country, whether you're listening this from the United States or whether you're listening to it from anywhere else. Just the thrill I feel like you would have to know that you are going and you're representing your country, regardless what country you're listening from. I think you could understand just how meaningful that would be. So I asked about that. I asked about the actual experience of being at the Olympics, being in the Olympic Village, all that kind of stuff. So I hope if you're listening to this when it's posted, you're probably knee deep in Olympics right now. This is during the first week. There was talk at one point of maybe it wasn't actually going to happen. Well, as I'm sitting right now, the Japan commissioners of the Olympics, the Summer Olympics here, that was canceled, of course, last year with COVID. They said, hey, we may not have it. So I believe that it will actually still happen. I'm sure that you're listening to this and it's happening. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But it was an absolute pleasure, absolute thrill to speak with Evan. I think that you're really going to enjoy this. You know, we don't get a lot of opportunities to pick the brain of an Olympian. So I hope that you listen to this and you learn a lot. I certainly did. So without further ado, here is my interview with Evan Weinstock. I am here today with Evan Weinstock. Evan, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. So I guess the first question I always ask people is kind of just go all the way back to the beginning and growing up. I guess with you, the big question would be, was bobsled and things like that something always in your pipeline? Because I know you, if I look correctly, you grew up in Las Vegas, which I don't feel like is a huge winter city. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in the desert, so far from any winter sports. Bobsled was not something that I had grown up really paying attention to. It wasn't until I got exposed to it through a college teammate who got an invite that I really put that on my radar. But early on, I guess in my childhood, I grew up in Vegas. I was a dual sport athlete in high school, did football in the fall, and then I did track and field in the springtime. And during track and field, I actually had a coach who introduced me to a unique event called the decathlon, which is Not contested in most states. It wasn't contested in Nevada. I actually had to go out of state to start doing some competitions. The decathlon is basically a all-encompassing track and field event where they do 10 different track and field events. So it's sprinting, jumping, throwing. It's a 2-day competition. So I did that a couple times while I was in high school. And then I started looking to going to different colleges to either play football or track. And I wasn't really decided on which one I would focus on in college. And then I actually had an opportunity with Brown to pursue both of them. So the Ivy League doesn't really have athletic scholarship, so they were able to leave it open-ended as far as what sports I want to participate in. And I thought that was a good opportunity to potentially do both football and track. And I unfortunately had a shoulder injury going into my freshman year, so I decided to take the fall season off, which was football. Only focused on track and field my first year of college, and really never went back to football. Just kind of stuck with track and field because I started having a lot of success, and plus the Ivy League academic rigors was a lot for me. So yeah, and that took me all through 4 years of college. Decided I didn't want to stop being an athlete, so I kept training. Went out to Stanford in Palo Alto, California, and I had an old track and field coach who was coaching over there. Decided to keep training post-collegiately, see if I can make it to the Olympic trials in track and field. Did a year post-collegiately and had a pretty good season. Ended up making a really small Team USA team for the decathlon up in Canada. And right after that competition was when I revisited bobsled, and they host these combines throughout the country. And I knew it was something that I'd be pretty good at least doing the combine. It was pretty much all track and field testing. So I thought worst case scenario, it was, just a really cool opportunity to keep testing different track and field fitness levels, and ended up having the top score in the country for the bobsled combine. And it's good. Rest of kind of history from there.
Right. So is that a common thing with bobsled, that people come from a lot of different areas and then get involved with it? Because obviously with some Olympic sports, we hear people their whole life they've trained for that one event since they were growing up. Obviously that's not the case with you with this. Is that normal with bobsled?
Yeah, I think it's one of the only events I can think of where people actually come into it much later on in life. Most of the athletes on the bobsled team were former collegiate athletes in other sports. People, as old as in their 30s are trying out for the sport. It's really, I think it's because it's a very raw athletic event where you can have these different backgrounds, and as long as you maintain a general level of athleticism, they're kind of transferable into what bobsled was. So football and track and field are probably the most common ones. And so I was no different in that I came from a track and field background and just ended up picking up the sport pretty quickly.
So for people who don't know anything about bobsled or sports really in general, tell us just a little bit about what bobsledding is.
Yeah, I would expect most people, especially in the U.S., don't understand what bobsledding is. It's a winter sport that basically is a mile-long ice track that we're sliding down. And there's for men, there's two disciplines: the 2-man bobsled and the 4-man bobsled. I participated in both, but the general idea is that there's one pilot who steers the sled, and then there's push athletes, or we call them brakemen, who are powering the sled off the line and hop in and steer. And the pilot, he pushes the sled as well. He's just the first one inside the sled, and it's his job to kind of navigate the sled down the mountain. So it's a sport that there's a lot of different it's small intricacies that really make it an interesting sport. I think it's, from surface level, it's just a really quick, fun race, but I think there's a lot of technology involved in the sleds. There's a lot of prep work and the driving itself. To put it in perspective, at the Olympics in 2018, there's 4 different runs for the competition, which means there's 4 trips down the mountain. It's roughly a mile-long track, and we make it down the track in, say, roughly 49 seconds. And it's a sport that's measured into the 10th or to the 100th of a second. So after 4 miles of competition, there was a dead tie for the gold medal, down to the 100th of a second. So a lot of different things go in, a lot of different factors that make or break a good run. And it's kind of our job as brakemen and as a crew to eliminate and try to make it down as quick as possible.
Yeah. So how do you do that exactly? I know you said, what was it? The pilot? What was the pilot and then the brakeman? How does, the brakeman in the sled, is it a sled?
Yep.
So how does the brakeman actually, while it's moving, what are they doing? Are they shifting their body weight around, or what's happening there?
Yes. No. So I think that's, it's kind of a misconception that, we're actually leaning in the sled. We're more so, once we get into the sled, there's not a lot there. A lot of it's the prep work or it's the push for us, but we're trying to stay relaxed and we're trying to stay flow with the sled. We're trying to hold our bodies in positions where we're out of the airstream, because we want to be any sort of, if our shoulders are sticking up, it's causing like air resistance, which is going to slow us down. If we are shifting our body in the sled, that could potentially cause it to go into a skid, which is going to cause friction, which is going to slow you down. And it's not a very big sled, and typically bobsledders are very big athletes. They're big and strong. So you have 4 guys getting crammed into a sled. It's not the most comfortable, and you have to do the best way you can to get in position, hold that position all throughout the track, and follow along with where the sled's going. So we study the track. We need to understand where we are, whether it's curve 1, curve 14, or what's going on, so that we know that, how to hold our bodies in a position, and then also when the finish line comes out, when to pull the brakes if you're the very last guy in the sled. So
you're talking about the tracks. I tried to do some of my research, and I know that the oldest track in the world is in Switzerland, Cresta Run. Have you ever competed there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Switzerland's the birthplace of bobsled. They actually have a beautiful track that's all natural, which means it's handmade every year. Every other track around the world is a refrigerated concrete track that stays the same. But in Switzerland, it's kind of tradition for the town to come in and build the track every year once it gets cold enough in the winter. So it's a beautiful track. It's in St. Moritz, which is a very ritzy ski town. A lot of people go there. There's snow polo, very expensive shopping. And it's actually a track that goes from St. Moritz down through the forest, and it ends up in another town in Stellarina. So a really fun track to be, a really exciting atmosphere, because the whole town comes together and celebrates the sport. So definitely fortunate to get on that track.
No, that's really cool. So again, for the average fan that sees these sports maybe, every 4 years when the Olympics come around, what's the difference between bobsledding, luge, and skeleton?
So there's big differences between luge, bobsled, and skeleton. I think that so bobsled and skeleton are under the same federation. So meaning we have the same kind of board of directors, same funding. We kind of travel on the same schedule. Luge is going to be separate. And I think it's probably because the type of athletes that do skeleton and bobsled are very similar. Skeleton is where you run and you hop on a sled and you're going head first down. So there's a running component, which means a lot of athletes have former backgrounds and they transition and try the sport just as similar as bobsled athletes do. Where luge is, they're sitting on the sled and then they pull themselves to start. So it's really a technical. They're steering the entire time. It's one of those sports that you typically think of where you're growing up as a child doing the sport, and it takes years and years of practice to become good at it. So, staying at the Olympic Training Center, we used to have luge athletes, the little kids that were basically staying with us as full-time athletes that were just developing themselves to become, the next Olympians, where skeleton and bobsled athletes are usually older and they come from other backgrounds. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between them. Luge is obviously feet first, skeletons head first, and then bobsleds in a big sled. So those on the surface level, that's kind of the main difference.
So which one do you think is, obviously with just dynamics and being heavier, obviously I feel like you may be going faster, but I don't know which one are you going faster and which one maybe causes the most danger. Which one's the most dangerous?
Yes. So luge is, I think, typically thought of as the most dangerous. I think you're not as protected, obviously, as bobsled. I think bobsled has plenty of crashes as well. Skeleton, you're literally inches off the ice. So if you do crash, it's not as bad of a crash. Luge, they're a little bit higher up. So when they do crash, it's pretty nasty and they don't have any protection. I think that, famously, there was unfortunately the luge athlete that died in 2010 in Vancouver, and he was training. So all three of them are, fairly dangerous at times, especially once you crash. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. I think luge and bobsled probably go around similar speeds. Bobsleds, depending on the track, can reach up to 95, 98 miles per hour. Luge can get up to those speeds, and skeleton's not too far behind, but a little bit slower. More mass, typically the faster you go.
All right. So how does competitions go? Is there a lot of domestic competitions, or do you have to really do a lot of traveling in order to actively compete?
Yeah. So because most of the tracks, they're artificial and made of concrete, there's only a couple of locations around the world that you can actually do the sport. I think within the U.S., there's only two tracks. It's Lake Placid, New York, and then Park City, Utah. Canada has two tracks, Calgary, Canada, and then Whistler up in Vancouver. So there's different circuits of racing. There's the North America's Cup, where basically you just do competitions around Canada and the U.S. There's the European Cup, which is just doing competitions around Europe. And then there's the World Cup, where you kind of travel all around to all these different tracks. And that's the top level track where we're competing. So Germany has 3 different bobsled tracks. Austria has one. Switzerland has one. Then they built the one in Korea for the Olympics, and now the new Chinese track for the upcoming Olympics in 2022. So, and then there's a few retired tracks here and there in Japan or Italy, but they're not as commonly competed on anymore.
Yeah. So is this a sport, given that there's very few even tracks, there's some sports that I guess there's so many people that when you get to the Olympics, a lot of times, you're competing against people that maybe you've never seen before, but given this is a little bit more of a tighter knit sport, maybe, are you in the Olympics just at a higher stage, but you're really kind of competing against some of the same people that you've competed with, the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's exactly that, the Olympics, you knew everybody you were competing against, and you kind of knew how you stacked up even going into it. It's the same exact people on the World Cup stage. I think the field is a little bit larger, so they allow some smaller nations to compete. But it's a really tight community. Everyone within the bobsled community is pretty good friends from all the different nations. And so it's a good time to just kind of travel around. You go stop to stop, week to week, different countries, and we're doing the same races over and over. So certainly when we got to the Olympics, it was no different. You kind of knew exactly what to expect going into it.
Yeah. So again, just to kind of familiarize ourselves with bobsled, who are if we're wanting to find like the big names, at least in history? Who are the Michael Jordans and the Peyton Mannings of bobsled?
Yeah, well, I mean, they certainly haven't got the same amount of fame as anybody like that. I don't know if anybody can think of famous bobsledders beyond like maybe the Jamaican bobsled team from the Disney.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about Cool Runnings. I wasn't going to do that, but if you want to.
I figured that it's inevitable that we're going to talk about Cool Runnings at some point. But I think, within the U.S., we certainly had some big names, as Steve Holcomb, who was 3-time Olympic medalist, won gold for the U.S. team in 2010, 2 medals in 2014. And unfortunately, he passed away going into the 2018 game. So he's probably the most well-known bobsledder within the U.S. Certainly, he was the top pilot for our country for 20 years. And then internationally, Germany has a really dominant history in the sport. Two guys that are competing right now who won gold, and Korea, they've pretty much dominated every race since the Olympics. And, that's Francesco Friedrich and Thorsten Margus, which is his brakeman. So those are some big names within the sport. I'm not expecting people to recognize them the same as Michael Phelps or, Lindsey Vonn or anything like that. But,
well, yeah, I mean, recognition doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just more about who's the ones that really had the talent. That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that Germany for sure has been dominating as far as winning medals goes. The U.S. used to be on that level. I think with Steve Holcomb when he was competing, they were winning every race. They won a couple world championships in between. Not only did he win gold in 2010 and two Olympic medals in 2014, but a lot of races in between that. So the U.S. used to be a pretty dominant program. Unfortunately, things have gone downhill a little bit, and they're still working their way to try to get back on the podium.
Yeah, and you said that he was the pilot for 20 years. So, I mean, how older are these athletes when they're retiring? It sounds like they can compete for a long time. If some aren't even starting until they're 30.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's everybody kind of has their own different story about when they came into the sport and when they left. There's been a lot of athletes that have stayed in the program for many, many years. I think it's depending on your situation, but I know that there's like Canada had a push athlete who was 43, Lascelles Brown, who's still pushing, and he was one of the best athletes as well. So I think as long as you can keep healthy and it's something that you enjoy doing, it's something you can do very well, like late into your career. But a lot of different factors go into that depending on how long you want to stay into it. So.
Yeah. So tell us just a little bit about, I guess, competing in the Olympics and being, I guess, chosen to represent the country. What was that like?
Yeah, it was obviously, a lifelong dream of mine to compete in the Olympics. As a track and field athlete, the Olympics were always the pinnacle of athletics. And so that was something that I always strived for. I, didn't necessarily think it was a reality or, it was realistic for me to get to that level. But when I was introduced to the sport of bobsled and quickly saw how I was able to advance in the sport and be really competitive with not just the American program, but with international programs, that reality started to come about. And I know going into the Olympic year, I had put myself in a really good position on the team to be one of the top athletes. And I knew that as long as I could stay healthy and stay on the path that I was progressing on, that I would be at the Olympics. And so that expectation was kind of, lying around for the last year or two leading up. And then when the team was officially announced just a month before the games, it was certainly a relief. I don't want to necessarily say it was expected, but I was certainly hoping to be there. And getting to the Olympics itself was a pretty surreal experience. I was fortunate to be teamed up with previous Olympians, and so I took a lot of advice from them about what to expect, how to go in there, and how to manage kind of the attention. I think that was the biggest thing. Was all of a sudden, now we have media attention. You have people who you've never talked to for years now, reaching out because, all of a sudden you're one of a Team USA Olympian who's really everybody wants to talk to and find out about what's going on. But it's a sport that I've been doing for the last 3 years. So the media attention was certainly a big shock and something that was had to be managed as I, still had a goal of going out there and competing. But I think I handled it pretty well. I really enjoyed the experience. I think that it was, I tried to take in as much as I can, even with competitions going on throughout it. I tried to get to other events, see Shaun White win gold and some other cool things like that. So,
yeah, you may have been in the last Olympics that's just completely like we were used to back in the day. Who knows what the Olympics are going to look like in the future? This next one's already going to be an interesting one from what I hear.
Yeah, definitely. It's unfortunately what's going on with the world lately, and especially with sports and athletics, it's perhaps may never kind of be the same, just with getting spectators and fans. But I know they'll do everything they can to keep that spirit and the experience going for not only the athletes but the fans. And looking forward to kind of seeing how it progresses the next year or two.
Yeah. I like to hear, obviously, there was a lifelong dream. I think it's kind of interesting to hear that probably even as a high school senior, when you were dreaming of going to the Olympics, you probably would have never thought it was going to be for bobsled, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was certainly not on my radar, especially in high school and in Las Vegas. But it was a really unique opportunity that I felt really fortunate for, and it was really exciting. I think I was Las Vegas's first ever Winter Olympian, so that was a pretty cool experience to come back to, especially now that they have a professional hockey team. I think it was really cool for people to see, and I think it was kind of opened them up to a whole different world of winter sports in the local area.
For sure. So what's something maybe about the Olympics? This is always a hard question for people to answer, but what's something about being involved in the Olympics that may surprise people?
Yeah, I guess it goes by extremely fast. We were out there about a month, but the whole Olympics itself was only about 2 weeks. I think one thing that I was slightly disappointed on, I had all these friends and family come and visit me, and I just really didn't have the time, or really logistically I couldn't link up with them just because we're kind of on lockdown in the Olympic Village. So I wish I would have had an opportunity to really take in like what was going on, because it really is like the biggest world event at the time. And there's so much going on as far as entertainment or things like that. And really, I was just kind of isolated in a bubble and carrying on, like, as you pointed out, it was the same kind of competitions as I was doing prior, just with a little bit more attention. So it was a really fun experience, especially for my family and friends to enjoy. And I certainly kind of wish I could have relived it from another perspective as well. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess one thing to ask about it, and we'll change the slogan you're used to there in Las Vegas, but I mean, is the Olympic Village as crazy as people say, or is what happens in the village stays in the village?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe that was another surprise for me, that it wasn't as crazy as I expected or I'd heard. But maybe it was just from my perspective. I think I lived in a suite with 8 other bobsledders, and I had competition. The 2-man was the first or the second week of the Olympics, and then the 4-man was the same day as the closing ceremony. So maybe it was just our group wasn't going out and partying as much, or wasn't able to take in some of those experiences. But I think I expected everything to be just a little bit more chaotic. And I think most athletes in general that I was around seemed a little bit focused and more buttoned up. So,
yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing given, the task at hand. But yeah, so what I couldn't really find is, I mean, you're on the, the USA website, but are you still involved in the program, or are you not competing anymore?
I think that's a tougher question than I wish I could answer. I think it's I after 2018, after the Olympics, I decided to take some time to develop my career outside of the sport. So I walked away from the team. I moved out to San Francisco. I was working full time, and since then have relocated to New York City. I've been working here full time now. Still trying to figure out, if there is a pathway of me returning. I haven't, officially retired or closed that door. I'm still pretty young. I walked away as one of the younger guys on the team, and certainly at a really high level. Um, I found it difficult to train at the same way I like to train, especially while working a full time job and being in the real world. I think as athletes, we're just so used to kind of being in our bubble of the Olympic Training Center, and really just focused everything on training, which was, eating, sleeping, and whatever we could just to work out the next day. And now I got to manage finances, do other things, and navigate the real world. And I think it makes it a little bit more difficult, but it's not out of the question. It's something I'm still trying to consider if there's time for me to get in shape, or really with the state of the team. I stayed in really good contact, and I have great relationships with the entire program and the athletes that are still remaining. So I don't think it would be impossible for me to return, but we'll have to figure out a few other life decisions before I make that.
Well, all we can say, I guess, is the best of luck on whatever you do decide. So is it, you said that, it was a life of training and kind of only thinking about that. So when you were on the team and preparing, was that your full-time job? Was that all you were doing?
Yeah. I think that was one of the difficult things is that, bobsled, as I said, you're pretty much with the team 24/7. It's not like you can be living out in California and be training and then just fly in for the competition. You need to be with the teammates, prepping, the sleds, traveling with them. And so it is a full-time job. Pretty much every athlete that was on the team, that was their only focus. We were traveling internationally 3 or 4 months out of the season. So it's really hard to maintain like something consistent back in the real world.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already kind of maybe transitioned, whether you transition back or not, eventually you won't be bobsledding. So what does the future hold? What are your passions outside of the sport?
Yeah, I think I'll forever be trying to answer that question, but I think uh, I was fortunate to get a pretty good degree in college. I was a biology background. I was pre-med at the time. Don't really have any interest in going back to medical school. So I ended up working in medical devices out in San Francisco. I've been selling those with orthopedics, and then worked for a healthcare startup for a little bit out in New York, back working for a medical device company. So staying within healthcare has kind of always been something that's interesting to me. But definitely considering other careers and other business professions. So
Yeah, whether you go back to bobsled or not, I think you forever have, maybe the winner when people say, "What's 3 interesting things about you?" To have been an Olympic bobsledder, I think you may beat just a few other people.
Yeah, it certainly helps with dating too sometimes.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can only imagine. Yeah, so I mean, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I do want to make sure, should you have any way that you want people to connect with you. I don't know whether that's the case, but if you've got any social media you want to shout out there, always give people the opportunity.
Yeah, sure. I'm, not as active as I used to be when I was an athlete, but certainly my messages are always open on Instagram. At Evan Weinstock is my profile. So, happy to talk to anybody about anything, or I'm sure there's many people out there considering about maybe trying out for the team, and I would encourage you to, and certainly happy to talk to people about anything. So.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Jackson. Appreciate it.
And that was my interview with Evan Weinstock. Hope you enjoyed that one. I learned a ton for sure. You know, the cool thing about the Olympics is I don't think that a lot of these sports, and I could be wrong, but at least personally, a lot of these sports, most of the time, other than every 4 years, I don't see a lot about them. I don't, watch a ton of bobsled and luge and even figure skating or alpine skiing or all these things. It's kind of a rare treat that every 4 years we get to see not just these sports, but to see people from the highest level out of all of the countries in the world, or at least a good deal of countries from the world, compete in these kind of more lesser known areas, these lesser known sports. So I always am glued to the Olympics. Like I said in the beginning, I'm recording this the week before the Olympics, so hoping that the Olympics is happening. Like I mentioned, the Japan commissioners were kind of saying they weren't sure with the COVID restrictions, but fingers crossed that I am knee deep watching these Olympics right now, because every 2 years with the Summer Olympics and then the Winter Olympics, I am always glued to the TV, almost day and night, watching almost every competition. So it was a treat to talk to someone who has lived that experience, competed at the highest level, and competed in a sport that I didn't know a ton about. I always like to learn, about different sports, about different professions, kind of uncover a little bit about the lesser known aspects, and Evan was really great for agreeing to join me. So I appreciate him. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me this week and listening. Do check out Evan. He mentioned his social media connections with Evan Weinstock on Instagram. Obviously, if you haven't, follow this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, get on Instagram, Not in a Huff Podcast, Facebook, jacksonhuff.com. We're everywhere. Appreciate your support. We'll see you next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.